Everything Japanese is really Chinese? Seriously? Well, yes. I mean, this title is clearly a generalization, right? And what it means is that the main cultural items that are widely assumed across the world to be Japanese actually come from China. Here we go. Number one, ramen. Ramen is a Chinese noodle dish, not Japanese. It was brought to Japan by Chinese travellers in the late 1800s. The original Japanese name for ramen was shina soba, meaning Chinese noodles. Number two, Japanese writing. The Japanese writing system known as Kanji has a name formed of two elements. Kanji literally means Han writing. Han is the biggest ethnic group in China. Number three, the kimono. This was an adaptation of the type of draped silk clothing from China known as Hanfu. After the start of the Heian period in Japan in 794 AD, it became popular and started to acquire unique Japanese elements. Number four, blossom trees. Japan's famous cherry blossoms actually come from a tree indigenous not to Japan, but to the Himalayas, which border southwest China. In fact, a long way from Japan. The practice of celebrating the annual blossoming of beautiful trees, such as the cherry blossom and the plum blossom, spread from southwest China across to Korea and Japan, taking several centuries to make that journey. Number five, sushi. Sushi is fish with vinegared rice. It's vinegared to give it a pickled taste, and that's a clue towards its origins. It was a Chinese pickled dish in which salted fish was wrapped in fermented rice. Even today in Japan, a sushi kitchen is called a tsukaba, which means pickling place. Number six, the Japanese language. Japan has its own language, sure, but statisticians have calculated that at least 60% of Japanese vocabulary comes from Chinese origins. Number seven, being ruled by an emperor. In the early 7th century, the Japanese adopted the title of emperor from China for their own leaders. They used the same Chinese characters and the same concept that the leader by definition was the son of heaven. This new rank was then retroactively applied to all past Japanese rulers, who all became emperors and sons of heaven. Sorry, ladies. Number eight, bonsai. The practice of growing miniature trees and creating tiny landscapes developed in China more than 1,500 years ago. It was known as penjing. The technique was introduced to Japan in the 7th century from China. Number nine, sashimi. It was the Chinese rather than the Japanese who realized more than 1,800 years ago that the flesh of certain fish was delicious, eaten raw. No cooking necessary. Food historian Jacqueline Newman said that raw fish consumption began in southern China before 200 AD. And of course it came to Japan much later, about 1,100 years later. Number 10, the tea ceremony. The tea ceremony originated in China during the Tang dynasty, which is about 600 to 900 AD, as you knew. It developed as a meditative health practice before evolving into an artistic ritual by the time of the Song dynasty, which started in 960 AD. Now, it was then taken to Japan by monks, like many Chinese cultural practices. Number 11, the board game called Go. Now, in Western culture, Go is a game associated with Japan. But in reality, it's probably the world's oldest board game, originating in China about 4,000 years ago, according to Encyclopedia Britannica. The game was taken from China to Japan in 500 AD, which is comparatively recently in Chinese terms. Number 12, green tea. Green tea, or matcha, comes from China and has been consumed for probably 4,000 years. It was brought to Japan by monks, again, during the 8th and 9th centuries, very recently by Chinese standards. Two holy men, Sai Cho and Kukai, are credited with bringing it over the waters to Japan from China. Number 13, architecture. The Japanese admired China's extraordinarily long-lasting structures made of interlocking wooden elements. And so there was a lot of temple building based on Chinese innovations in 6th century Japan. The Japanese capital, Nara, copied the checkerboard street layout of the Chinese capital, Chang'an. But it must be said the Japanese afterwards developed many of their own unique architectural elements. 14. The Asian sword. It was actually Tang dynasty scientists in China who revolutionized sword making in the 7th century with a blade called the Bao Gang Fa. They fused high carbon steel, which enables sharpness, with low carbon iron, which provided strength. The result was a blade that could slice through samurai armor. Now, Japanese envoys brought Chinese swords back to Japan in the 700s. To give them due credit, the Japanese could be said to have improved both the recipe and the design to eventually come up with the curved katana sword. 15. Cultural figures. One of the most famous pop culture items from Japan is Dragon Ball, though the creator of Dragon Ball fully admitted that his story was simply a retelling of the Chinese classic Journey to the West. Here's the backstory. Back in 1983, Akira Toriyama decided to create a manga comic book. It would retell the story from the 16th century Chinese novel, Journey to the West. Now, that novel stars a supernatural main character named Sun Wukong, which in Japanese is said Sun Gu Ko. In the original book, he and 3 friends go on a journey in search of mystical scriptures. In the manga, Toriyama made it into a tale of a supernatural main character called Guko and 3 friends going on a journey to gather the 7 dragon balls, orbs that summon Shenlong, a dragon who can grant wishes. Now, Toriyama thought the world would want an alternative to Western comic books and deliberately gave it a very Chinese setting. He used Chinese buildings and photographs of China that his wife had taken, and of course beautiful mountains. Pokemon is another Japanese modern classic, and that's got many ancient Chinese elements too. Research the 9-tailed fox, for example. 16. Zen. Now, this is on my list because it also came from China to Japan, but it didn't originate in China, or at least not entirely. It's believed that an Indian monk, some say his name was Bodhidharma, came to China around 520 AD. His teachings became combined with Chinese philosophies such as Taoism, and that led to the development of a practice called Chan, which is how the word Zen was originally pronounced. Now, records indicate that Chinese Chan Buddhism reached Japan in the 7th century, but was not firmly established in that country until the 12th century, when it was called Zen. Okay, I gave you 16 items. Things assumed to be Japanese by most people, but which are actually rooted, have their origin in Chinese culture. But there are others, so feel free to add more. Or shoot down the ones I've listed if you prefer. I always like to learn. But first, let's deal with a natural question. Why do so many Japanese items come from China? Well, for much of history, China was the cool place, the happening place, the big place, the creative place, the obviously dominant cultural centre of the most highly populated part of the world. So naturally, people wanted to visit it, people from Vietnam, Laos, everywhere. One ancient record shows that between AD 603 and AD 839, the Japanese alone sent at least 17 diplomatic missions to the Tang dynasty royal courts in China. I'm going to add one more item to my list. Do the Japanese people themselves come from China? You know, the simple answer is that DNA shows that all the peoples of East Asia clearly overlap. I mean, that's obvious, right? But this is one of those questions that you're not really allowed to ask. If you do an academic study that emphasizes the difference between the Japanese and their neighbors, it will be published and it will be quoted in Wikipedia and so on. But if you get any other views, well, don't go there. That's my advice. Don't court controversy. Stay safe, read widely. Peace.